feely wheelies start with affects and a mindfulness of how it affects us, and qualia affects us. It's just what qualia does. It's how it works. It operates through affects that have affects and effects, which are a little distinct. We could think of them as having two separate categories in terms of how we represent and interpret psychological processes that are necessary to living meaningful, purposeful, productive existences that are proactive and also positive and radiate this positivity primarily through meaningfulness processes that require thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness that is bound to psychological information and what's true, what's truly known, what is truly the case, and a matter of fact has solidifying knowledge, solidifying information properties that have integrity and which are valid. Valid is essential for making it true. And without validity, the semanticizations, in particular of statements, would fall flat on their face. And the meanings that are functional and operational to them would cease to be operational. So thoughtfulness is necessary for any semantic content or thoughts, thinking, psychological processing on all levels, but not necessarily neurotransmission, but in reciprocal relation to neurotransmission involving conductivities that have these psychological boundness to them and laws associated. So that's important to parse out or to abstract out, in particular once we have those capacities to do so, and to think about things in this psychological dynamic space in which information is operating in a symposium, meaning these organizations of constitutional information that provide not just laws but instructions and information that is necessary on obtaining resources such as you ate food, you have to metabolize resources, there's sourcings and associated perceptions and behaviors that will then proceed subsequently, but during the moments of ingestion, digestion, are processing information that have associated information on how you originally acquired that source of food and ate, the behaviors associated with that, why that's meaningful, why that's important, why that's significant, all through a basis of thoughtfulness and psychological information and the objective information needed for that operating system. So it's important to understand thoughtfulness there rather than meaningfulness that is also integrated within a separate dual psychological process, because, well, what happens usually when you eat or you ate, there's tastiness to that flavoring and a subjective experience that's directly connected to that nervous system transduction, as well as the sensory preceptor and perceptual process that's associated with that, allowing for higher order processing of psychological information in direct forms of self-knowing and these ways of knowing that are important for guiding and leading meaningful, purposeful, productive existences, and ones that are continued moving forthcoming through direct devourings and endeavorings of engagement with what's necessary in terms of the essential goods and material substances, but also information and substantive information in particular that have these constitutions of knowledge embedded within them and that endow thoughtful meaningfulness within them, requiring us to consider not just the meanings and the thought in whatever it is, any potential subject matter or content that can come across the mind or be transduced within reason and considering our potentials in alignment and association with that, and our capacity to also extend the mind's capability to actually gain access and to increase the amount of freedoms of conscious, but also what we can do as individuals through enhancing our capacity for thoughtful processing and knowledge, but also a good conscience of that allows us to integrate innovation in more of these innovative and directions in which we may have thought once impossible, but which potentiate new possibilities through engaging in the world with innovative behaviors that are markedly defined by the distinctive and novel instantiations of not just meaning, but structural, functional, operating associations that are dynamical to objects and materials in our surrounds, and which we interact to be able to do anything innovative, and which begin with innovative interest, and interest in particular, which is innately an innovative process that starts with basic emotions, and basic emotions that are unique to our self-intelligence, and which innovation itself has a lengthy evolutionary history that is embedded, even observable and perceivable and conceivable within chimpanzees and other primate species such as bonobos or gibbons, that all have use of tools and consideration for the surroundings in these dynamical and affective ways that support these thoughtful, meaningful processes at various levels of complexity, but which are really unique in terms of our freedoms of conscience, in particular, and consciousness of the self, when we're considering our own minds in relation to what's true, and what it means to be an individual with an embodied self, and a psyche in particular, which is also a marked distinction and individual difference of our species, related particularly to Homo sapiens, or what it means to be a human and a human being, and situated within an existence that has these centralizing existential concerns such as the finitude of existence, or whether or not life is meaningful or meaningless, and how we go about our self-direction from that point and standpoint, and considering the triviality of existence, or why we should do anything at all, and why things are seemingly inherently both meaningless and meaningful, or at times completely meaningless, and which we lack motivation to potentially do anything, or which, in contrast to that, we might become more frustrated and angry and engage in what is these absurdities of life and confront the absurd. But it's also through that confrontation that we could start to recognize the new philosophies or potentials for ourselves, through regulating absurdity and recognizing it also as an emotional encounter and experience, but also which can be linked to a set of specific events or qualities or states of experience that could be momentary or pertain to different continuous sets of events and encounters in the world, and in which we can, through our freedom of expression and consciousness and our own self-regulations and ways of operating and functioning through that, change the spin of the quality or the nature of how we engage philosophically with the world through embodiment, but not just philosophically, through our direct perceptions, and which can individuate us and help us to recognize our individual differences, but also awaken our virtues in terms of self-knowledge and the ways of knowing, but also good conscience, awakening our conscience to what isn't necessarily true, but what we know subjectively to be true in accordance with our good conscience, and what accords doing good and doing something with a purpose and intent to do good, and not just intent to do good or perceive the self doing good, but to be concerned with actually doing good and really doing good in a really true, really truly known and really truly known through the subjective experience, primarily in good conscience, that one has done something that's good, such as benefit somebody's physical health, or helps them, or do something that helps to prolongate their survival, especially when they want to live, and they would be very happy if you were to do something in particular that could allow them to sustain their existence, and you do so out of your own free volition or without even being asked to do. This is an exemplification of kindness or aspect of virtuous behavior. And there's various virtuous behaviors out there, such as learning every day and loving to do so, and being willing to deepen knowledge and share what you learn, but also your own creative insights with your own discretions, and done so wisely, in which you are also to some degree responsible in good conscience for the instantiations that you have directly created within other minds, if you so are a consenting and agreed upon teacher, because it's important to make sure that we're not just educating minds, that it's not so much about actually educating, but increasing an individual's self-direction and propensity to learn as individually different, independent minds to a physical surrounds that's separated and has these gaps of information between you and I, and that is in relation to this physical position in space, and involves a theory of mind that's necessary for understanding some of the deepest truths of our existence that pertain to the psychological mind through that theory of mind, and one that's accessible potentially to everybody, even individuals who currently have impairments of theory of mind, because these are predicated on information and knowledge-based correspondence within the psychological processes and neurotransmissions of individuals that tend to be fluid and dynamical and constantly shaped by information and interpretations of information that are fluid and dynamical, and have also the same and similar operations which allow for stabilization and the retention and validity of an existence of psychological information and knowledge, but also the sharing of information and knowledge that can be the exact same, similar, but also only through the conceivability limitations of the epigenome and the structures that enable it, individually different knowledge that itself can provide universals and access to deeper psychological truths that might be harder to access or otherwise unattainable if it wasn't for these individual differences that, once they become instantiated within the epigenomes of individuals, can be shared or turned into innovative technologies that allow for greater access to information that is universalizable and ubiquitous, and can extend the functions of the mind similar to technologies, and exemplifies the merits of the intellectual virtues and the virtues of knowledge and thoughtfulness, but also pragmatic aspects of what it means to live meaningfully. But not just pragmatic, these direct perceptual and direct perceptually functional, not just philosophical, but truly psychological and objectively true ways of self-knowing and ways of virtue, ways of self-virtue in particular, that cultivate virtuousness that is not just perceived, but is actual and really true in regards to how we conduct ourselves in the world through our good conscience, and authentically so. When there's these alignments across our mind and body philosophies, and embodying of our mind and body, our theories of mind and dynamical association to our surrounds, that involves an understanding and knowledge of the body that is innate and must be innate, just like eat, just like walk, just like in some cases talk, in most cases talk, and thought and thinking and doing anything and sculpting meanings and sculpting our virtues through engaging in virtue and interest that ultimately broaden the good through our exemplification and how we change and interact with information in our surrounds. So I hope you enjoy. Have a good one. Bye.